Eric Schmidt, who's the CEO of Google, said we are a company founded on questions, not answers. Apple uses the Socratic method, which is answering a question with a question. It's not a coincidence that a lot of great American companies are founded on the importance of questions.
Welcome back to the You Can Too podcast. On today's show, we have Danielle Robay on the show. She is a TV host, a journalist, a creator of Pretty Smart podcast. She's interviewed people like Taylor Swift, Simon Cowell, Tom Hanks, and she's the creator of Question Everything. And I'm so excited to dive into your journey. I'd love to start early on in your journey because obviously you moved from Chicago to LA, and that journey in itself is profound. And I'm going to dive into that. But what were some of the pivotal moments in your childhood that allowed you to take that leap and take so many leaps since?
That is such a good first question, James. You're so good.
I love it.
Well, first of all, thank you for having me on because from one question asker to another, it's always really nice when like the roles are flipped on you, you know? So I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Okay. What happened in my childhood? A few things happened in my childhood. The first is that I've always had a thirst for questions. I've always been curious. I was the kid that like I was in the back seat and the light would turn red and I'd say, why? And my parents would be like, let's play the quiet game. I was always curious. It came innately to me. And for some reason, I'd like to hang around adults a lot. My mom would tell me stories that like she would take me to the park and all the kids would be playing and she would be like, go play on the monkey bars. And I would be sitting on her lap listening to all of the adults and the women talking. And thirdly, I would say that I came from a family of talkers. We have a lot of conversation, a lot of opinions, a lot of loud voices. Two of my grandparents are professors, and the other side of my family are all Holocaust survivors. Wow. And so I think there's just a lot of storytelling and conversation that came at our dinner table each night. And I always felt like I had a lot to say and a lot to ask. Do you feel that way?
Absolutely. You're an old soul, and I definitely resonate with that as well. I've always surrounded myself with older people. I've always wanted deep conversations. I want to ask questions. I've always been curious about like everything in life that I've been curious about. And that's why obviously it's exciting to talk to a fellow interviewer, because asking questions is what we do. And I don't think that'll ever go away from us. Like just questions are everything. I think that they're the basis of so much of our lives. And I have a question for you, obviously, is I want to know your internal narrative in 2013 when you decided to move to LA and live in a garage for 6 months with your grandmother's friend that allowed you to stay there. Like, yeah, I don't think that I know that confidence, you've always had confidence. Like there's a part of that takes a role, but what allowed you to take that leap, and what was the internal narrative through that at that time?
The leap was, I always think, what's the worst that can happen? And the leap for me was, the worst that happens is it doesn't work out and I move back to Chicago and I get a job waitressing or whatever it is until I figure out my next move. But the narrative was really a lot of excitement. I was nervous. I'm not going to lie. Like my mom, I lived in a garage when I first moved to LA. And it was like my grandma's friend. She let me live there for free. And it was like, you know, sometimes in LA, people say garages and they think like a nice pool house. This was truly a garage.
Yeah.
But my mom came to LA and helped move me into the garage. And I didn't want to let her go. Like when it was time for her to leave, I hung onto her leg like a little puppy dog. And I was like, please stay just one more night. Like I was very nervous. But I also felt, and I still feel this way, incredibly driven. Like there's a fire that I can't quite explain, or I don't quite know what it is, but I've always been very motivated, and I had that in mind. I felt like I had things to do, and I just wanted to carve a path. I wanted to be in the game. I was just like, put me in, like I can do it, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I think that you still have that fire. Obviously, it's still going. I mean, when you
Yeah.
were, I think you would wake up at 2:30 in the morning to go to your morning shift. Like everything that you've done, you've had that fire within you, and you lived off credit cards. Like you've done so many things that people think, how were you able to do that? What prompted that, the ability to do that? Was there anything? And I always go back to childhood because obviously that forms who we are. But was there anything that maybe your parents gave you a safe place to be open and vulnerable about things, or whatever it came down to? Like what allowed you to have that confidence within yourself to go out and put yourself in positions to succeed, even though you know that there's so much that you could quote unquote lose from it.
Yeah. I felt like I had nothing to lose, actually. I only had things to gain.
Yeah.
Um, I guess I could lose. Yeah, I didn't feel like I had anything to lose, to be honest. I had I had like $8,000 in my bank account from odd jobs that I had in
Hmm.
college. And I worked at like a spin studio and I waitressed in the summers. And I felt like I'd actually be losing if I didn't go for it. I think that is still how I feel. But in terms of what made me feel safe, I think I always knew I had people who loved me at home.
Yeah.
Um, they weren't going to pay for me to make it, but they were going to love me whether I figured it out or not. And I think that sense of security and love definitely helps. But it doesn't always have to come from a parent. I think it's really helpful if it does. But I really believe that you need one person in your life that can say to you, I believe in you. You can do this. I'm here with you. How can I support you? Somebody to brainstorm with. Everybody needs a sounding board, you know, and sometimes that's a best friend. Sometimes it's a grandparent. I think you're lucky if it's a parent, right? But it doesn't have to be.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. And that the reason I wanted to pry deeper into that is because when you said that, you always thought of like what would happen if I didn't go towards that thing? A question that I often ask myself is what's the detriment of not taking action? Because it reminds me that usually the biggest failure is not doing anything at all rather than going towards something and failing towards it. And that's why I admire so much of your journey because you've taken leaps in every position in your life that you've created the opportunity, which I feel for a lot of people, they're wanting the opportunity to come to them. And I know that when you moved, like you would send flowers and like you've just done so much and it's really amazing to see. And like as you talk about mentors, I know Steve Carlston was someone that was big in your life. What was some of the advice that you took from him that changed the way that you approach life?
James, you're making me feel so seen. I'm so grateful for these questions and thank you for seeing my journey the way I see it. It means a
Absolutely.
lot. Um, Steve Carlston. Do you want the long story?
Give it. Yeah.
Okay, so I can tell you're a really ambitious person too, so you'll know what I mean.
Yeah.
So when I moved to LA, I had nothing. And I don't mean nothing in the proverbial sense. I had a sense of confidence and excitement, and I had parents who loved me, but I had very little amount of money to last, right? Like $8,000 may sound like a lot of money, but once you move to LA and have to get an
Yeah.
apartment and pay car insurance and all of that, it goes very fast. And I didn't know one person. And I was hungry. I was ambitious. All I wanted was a shot. And so I was never unkind to anybody. I would never step over anybody to get somewhere, but I was very focused. So if my friends wanted to go out and have fun on Thursday or Friday nights, I was busy. I was at my computer. And even if I wasn't, if I was resting, I was kind of going through things in my mind. Like I'd be up at night. I would wake up in the middle of the night sometimes and be like, how do I get to work at Entertainment Tonight? Or how do I get to work at E? Like I would go through scenarios. Who do I have to meet? What footage do I have to get? So when you're dealing with somebody like that, they really have just like a one-track mind. And I was late for a red carpet because I was lost. It was one of the first jobs I had.
Mhm.
And I ran into another camera person who was also lost. It was a very hard place to find. And we both together trying to find this place we're in front of a gym, an LA fitness studio in LA. And he saw somebody he knew. And we're all talking and this guy is 6 foot something and very like a handsome older man with silver hair and a lot of charisma. And he was holding a basketball. And I was kind of joking around with him. I was like, what are you doing playing basketball? Everyone on the court is 30 years younger than you. Like, I just had a big Chicago mouth. I would never say that now. And he looks at me and he goes, who are you? And I was like, I told him. And then I said, it was so great to meet you, but we're late. We got to run. So as I walk away, the camera guy says, do you know who that was? That was the GM, the general manager of NBC. And I was like, oh my God. So I run back up to him and I said, Steve, can I email you? And he said, sure. And he gave me his email. So we set up a time, which was so kind of him. He did not have to meet me. And I walk into his office, and I had done so much preparation because I decided that I was going to convince him that NBC was the only news station in LA that didn't have an entertainment reporter. And I said, we should create the position and I'm your girl. So I put together charts and ratings and all of the things that I thought would convince him. And I go to his office and we start to talk, and I show him sort of my presentation, and he's looking at this and he's like, Danielle, I'm the general manager. I know the ratings of my own network. And I was like, well, I just wanted to show you that entertainment, so we go on. And finally he looks at me and he goes, listen, I don't have a job for you, but I am going to be your friend. And I thought, okay, well, maybe down the road, Steve will change my career. And as I got to know Steve Carlston, he did something so much more profound. He changed my life because I saw how this man lived, and he was the most generous, thoughtful, giving. He was like, it almost felt like he wasn't real, and he never did it for his own, it never felt like self-aggrandizing. It was always because he wanted to be of service, and that's how he led. And I saw how he lived his life, and he'd have all of these serendipitous moments. Like, he would meet somebody and that person would introduce him to somebody who he knew from 30 years ago, or he met somebody and it was this incredible basketball player. And he had these moments because he was so connected and so in service of others, so genuinely. And I looked at him and I thought, that's how I want to live my life. So while I am really still ambitious and focused, my intention shifted to service entirely. And he never once, like, what's that word? Prophesize? Like, he never once told me to do this. We never had a conversation. I just saw how he lived and I thought, I want to be like that. And so now anytime I'm frustrated or I'm in an argument or things don't go my way, I think, what would Steve Carlston do? And he always comes from a place of love and service. And it's really how I try to lead because of him.
Wow. It's often the people that have the biggest impact on you, almost not that they don't try to do it, but they don't say anything. Just the way that they live is an attraction to that. It's like Larry King was so curious for you, and his curiosity made you more curious about when you're going out and just the way that you live your life as well, right? I know you had breakfast with him multiple times. What were some of the big lessons that you took from him that changed the way that you, whether it was just interviewing in general, because obviously I'm an interviewer and I'd love to take insights from that, but just the way that you lived your life? Because I find that the people that I've spoken to, the ones that are the happiest, that are in the best position in their life, they are the most curious people that I know. And I think that that's such a skill.
What do you think curiosity brings people? I try and figure this out all the time because I agree with you.
I think it provides people maybe with a new lens to look through life. It's like we all have a pair of sunglasses on, and if we're able to go from yellow to red or to orange, just provides you a new lens, makes you more excited to go after different things. And just, I think that's why we're here, is to explore our curiosities. Like, anything that has ever happened in life happened because someone was curious about something.
I think you're right. That's a great way of putting it. I think that's a huge part of it. I think there's like a growth mindset that comes with curiosity too. But yeah, Larry King was the most insatiably curious person I'd ever met. And he changed the way I ask questions. So the story with Larry is I was working at an entertainment news outlet, and I thought this was going to be my dream job. I was like the youngest person they had hired, and I thought, this is it for me. And I got there and I hated the job. I felt like I was writing about people's lives, and it wasn't in line with my new mission of service, right? Like it felt icky.
Yeah.
And I was like, why do I care about celebrity? I love that it's a mirror to pop culture. It shows us where we are and where we're going. I think, what's her name? Caitlyn Jenner is a
Yeah,
great
that's what I thought you
example
were
of
gonna say.
that,
Yeah.
because we weren't really talking about trans rights in a public forum until Caitlyn. And regardless of what we all feel about Caitlyn as a public figure,
Right.
I think as it was like a way to talk about a more complicated topic at the water cooler at work.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, who are the icons that have done this in a way that I really respect? It was Larry King. It was Robin Roberts. It was Barbara
Barbara.
Walters.
Yep.
It was, I thought Ryan Seacrest had done a really great job, Kelly Ripa. So I ended up quitting my job, and you mentioned living off my credit cards. This is when I was living off my credit cards, and I
Yep.
was so anxious because it's so brutal to like not be able to pay your rent or know when it's going to come in. And
Yeah.
you're like, I grew up in Chicago, so I had like, there's no one's house I could go crash at for a little bit, So a friend of mine was like, you're so depressed lately. This is so not you. I have a surprise for you. Be ready tomorrow at 6 a.m. And I got up and I put my hair in I did my hair and put my makeup on and walked into a deli called Nate and Al's at 7. And there was Larry King with like 6 of his childhood friends. And my friend said, "You're going to have breakfast with Larry. You're welcome." And I was so nervous because I had watched hundreds of hours of Larry King. Like I knew all of his interviews by heart. And so when I sat down and he started telling me things, I was like, yeah, you were wearing the green suspenders. I know that interview. It's on YouTube. But the whole first conversation we had, I didn't get any of and I had so many questions, like you and I love the process of interviewing. And so I had so many like X and O's types of questions.
Yeah.
And he just wanted to ask me, he wanted to know why the people were obsessed with the Kardashians and why were young kids obsessed with their phones. He had a flip phone, by the way, for like until he passed away. He never had a smartphone. And he was so magnetic and so curious. And so I answered all of his questions. Of course, I was so excited to be at breakfast with him. But then I looked at him at the end and I was like, Larry, I didn't get any of my questions in. Can I come back tomorrow? And he was like, don't you have a job? And I was like, actually, not really. I don't have a job right now. And he said, well, you're welcome anytime. So I started having breakfast with Larry King, which actually was the impetus to the creation of the card game, because he would always say to me, you need your own show. You need your own show. And I was like, Larry, no one's hiring me the way like CNN just hired you. It's just different now, Yeah. And once I started Pretty Smart, I would still have breakfast with him. And when he passed, I thought he's the most curious person I know. I called him in my mind like the king of questions. And so I put together 52 of my favorite questions in this card game, kind of in a particular order to elicit really deep conversation. Some are fun and light, but some are deeper and more reflective. And they really were in his honor. But I'll give you one of the things he taught me. So he would always say you have to personalize questions when people are being evasive. So like, for instance, and this is the example he gave me.
Yeah.
If you're interviewing a politician who doesn't believe in abortion, then you can't just ask about their view or their stance on abortion. He would say that you have to say, okay, say your daughter was raped and she was pregnant. Would you let her have an abortion? Obviously, this is an extreme question.
Yeah.
The example he gave me, and it elicits a whole different answer. And so now I do think about that, especially when I'm interviewing celebrities who are really media trained. I think about like, how do I personalize this question to get something deeper and more reflective out of them rather than just sort of a broad stroke,
Yeah, absolutely. You're such a great interviewer, diving into your work, and I think it's funny because I'm like you. I'm definitely not like Larry. I want to prep for days on end about all of the questions that I want to ask, because I treat it as like such a massive opportunity to get an hour of someone's time. Like I want to soak in all the questions that I have. And because if I don't know enough about your story, then how am I going to cater the questions, like you said, like to their current experience? I want to dive into your money mindset a little bit. This might be like a left turn a little bit, because
Yeah.
obviously you came to LA living in a garage for a few months, and then you, like you said, you lived off your credit cards. Leading into that, like, and I know that there's been experiences where you've worked with jobs where you got paid less than like other people that were doing the same thing as you. Like, how has your money mindset changed over time? Because I assume that when you started, it was a lot different than where it's at now. And what advice do you have for people?
I love this question. Yeah. My money mindset when I started was I didn't have one. I just wanted a shot so
Yeah.
badly that, and I do think that that's actually good at the beginning.
Yes. Yes.
You know, because I think people sometimes in Gen Z, like I hear like they want to be paid for their work all the time.
Hmm.
And that's great. Like people really should be paid, but I don't think you should ever trade in on an experience when you're young
Yeah.
for money, because there's a ton of jobs that I've done for free that got me to another job, or I met somebody there, or I could then say that I like had experienced that and I was qualified for the next thing.
Hmm.
So at the beginning, I had no money mindset except for get experience and get my repetitions in. Then when I started, I had my first full-time job at a place called Clever TV,
Hmm.
and I was making, I think, $51,000 a year. And I had found after like about a year and a half or 2 years, I found out kind of what other people were making.
Yeah.
And it was time for a raise. It was 2 years in. And I went into my boss's office and I asked for a raise, and I was so scared to ask. And what I said was something that a guy from a VC firm who, like, he told me that this is how I should go about it. I don't know if this is right or wrong, but this is what he shared. So I went into my boss's office and I said, George, I really want to bring my best to work every day and give this place 110%. And I'm going home and really worried about money all the time, because I lived in a studio apartment, and in LA, things are really expensive. And then you pay taxes on $51,000. And it's just like, I was working like 16-hour days. Like I didn't have time to get an extra job on the weekends, etc.
Yeah.
And so I'm really hoping that with this raise, then I can like really focus just all my efforts here. And he came back with like almost
2%.
nothing.
Yeah.
And I felt it was the first time I really felt like not valued. And I've learned since then that money really is about value, you know, and so it's okay to ask for it. So at that time, I then said, fine, he doesn't see my value. I'm going to go get another job. And that's what I did. I eventually left. I don't like the feeling. I can't ever be somewhere I don't feel valued or seen in a relationship, a job. I think it's very hard to change somebody's mind if they don't see your value. My suggestion would be to go find a person or a place who does, because to stay and try and prove yourself is just really difficult on your spirit. And I'm not sure it's very successful often.
Yeah.
And then I went to Chicago and I did a morning show, and I was being paid a third less than my male co-host. And my Black female co-host, I found out eventually, was being paid even less than me. And so there were clearly horrible principles there.
Yeah.
That said, I think we all really enjoyed the job. Like we had so much fun working together. It was a great show, an amazing experience. And I knew I was getting paid less, but I sat through it for a year because I thought, this is a big opportunity. Let me prove myself and I'll ask for a raise later. And when I asked for a raise, the same thing happened. They didn't see my value. And so I left. And a year later, the show went under. So I'm not saying that it's because I left, but I do think that when there's a mindset of not valuing the people who work for you, and I don't think I was the only one who was undervalued, that it comes through it shows through in other areas. So when that happened, I said never again. The Chicago thing was my big learning experience. And since then, I have always asked for pay parity, meaning whichever co-host I'm working with, we get the same amount, whether that person is bigger or smaller. I don't like those words, but whatever it is, it's pay parity, whether I have more followers or they have more followers, because really you're doing the same job for the same hours, etc. And my whole mindset has shifted. I feel like I really have. And I'll back up and tell you why my mindset shifted. And I'm not sure that this can come with anything but experience. For so long, I was so grateful for the opportunity because I had so much to learn. And then eventually I got enough repetitions in where I felt like I am really bringing something to the table now.
Yeah.
And that's when I felt comfortable asking for more. I don't know if that's how it is with everybody or if that's right, but I know that I started feeling comfortable asking for more when I knew I could really bring something to the table and provide a lot of value for them. So since then, it's been a lot better. And you'd be surprised what happens when you ask for more. I did an interview with Jamel Hill, who's an incredible journalist. And my favorite clip from our interview, it went viral online because I think it resonated with so many people, is she was like, gratitude and opportunity will cost you money. And I felt that my whole career. And so now I go in simultaneously grateful and looking for commensurate value.
Yeah. It's so powerful. I think that that's such an amazing story to tell because I think so many people are in that position where they feel like I should probably be paid more for this, or I'm providing more value than I'm getting back. And I think that's a really good, I think it should be the approach that you take to life, because I think in any opportunity, you'll probably get more from leaving somewhere than a place that you feel like you're not getting respected enough. And I think that that's a really important distinction. I know that Beauty Sick was a big part of your journey as well. That really changed your internal narrative as well, and like the way that you saw yourself, the way that you approached life. I would love to know, what were some of the actions that you took or some of the ways that you changed your life, the way that you lived your life after reading? Obviously there's the one quote that really resonated most with you, but how did that change your approach?
Yeah, I appreciate you asking this. Beauty Sick is a book written by Dr. Renee Engeln. She's a psychologist out of Northwestern. And when I did the morning show in Chicago, I picked up that book because I was spending so much time on my hair and makeup every morning, and I saw my male co-host sleeping in the green room. And Felicia and I, who was my female co-host, would look at each other like, this fucking guy is so lucky. We weren't mad at him. We were mad that we had to put makeup on.
Right.
And he got an extra hour of sleep, and we were so pissed because when you're waking up at 2:45 in the morning, that extra hour to sleep or to study or whatever it is just so much. So yeah. I really wanted to better understand my relationship with my appearance, or the time I wanted to put into my appearance. Mm-hmm. And I've also simultaneously always been a person who cares about my appearance. Like, I like to look nice and be put together, and I actually kind of like makeup. I find it creative and fun. I enjoy the process. So I just wanted to understand my intention behind it. So I pick up this book, Beauty Sick. And the first line says, 54% of women would rather be hit by a truck than considered fat. And oh my God, James, my stomach dropped, because if you had asked me that in high school, I would have said, yeah, for sure, I'd rather be hit by a car. Like, I made decisions in my life based on weight. I decided I was so excited to study abroad for 6 months in college. And I made a decision on where I was going to study abroad based on where I thought I wouldn't gain weight, because I heard that everybody who went to Italy or Paris to study gained weight. And I know this is very first world problems, I'm very aware, but I'm just trying to share my mindset, which was so weighed down in something that was sick. And when I read her book, I had since healed that. I had like worked on my really with myself. Like I had worked on cooking for myself and seeing my body as like food as fuel instead of something that was like for my weight.
Right.
And I changed my mindset and I was like, wow, the beauty's sick. Like we really are. She calls it invisible hours. It's like all this time that we spend focused on our beauty, and maybe we could learn another language. Or they say that over the course of a woman's lifetime, she spends $250,000 on beauty related things. And people always say that's tuition at an Ivy League school or the down payment on a house. And not that I don't do some of it. I still like makeup and hair and clothing, but I'm super intentional about how I like spend my time. And also, I know that I don't lead with it. And so I'm okay with that too. I'm not like obsessed. I don't like look in the mirror and obsess over things that are wrong on my, like I think of it as like creativity and fun and not anything so serious.
It's a really good mindset shift. I think it's like a lot of people go to the gym because they're trying to fix something within themselves rather than trying to support themselves for the future. It's like discipline should be a practice, not a punishment. And that's the kind of the
Mm,
realm that you kind of see through things. And I think it's a
that is
really
a
important
bar,
distinction.
James.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's
Should
a
be
really
a
important distinction.
practice, not a punishment. That is so good.
Yeah. Because
I
if you think of
agree
the
with.
good.
No, please.
Yeah, I think it's the way that the approach that you have towards life rather than coming from a place of shame instead of love. And I think that's the approach you have to come from is love. Like I'm enough as I am, not that I have to solve something within myself. Is there something that you're still trying to prove to yourself?
Yes, and I'm going to answer that in 1 second, but you made me think of something.
Yeah,
I think in our how old are you?
20.
Okay, so I'm 32, and I think in millennial and Gen Z generations, we have shorter attention spans and are obsessed with um, the outcome of something.
Hmm.
And it makes people not think about the long game. And Steve Carlston actually said this to me, that if you don't grow roots when you're young, you're like a tree, you're going to tip over when you're old.
Yeah.
And I really agree with that. And it's like you have such a different, I can tell, a different mindset. Like when people go to the gym, they're like, I want to look so good. I want a six pack. I want this. When you and I go to the gym, we're like, okay, yes, we want to look good, but we want longevity. I
Hmm.
want to be 95 doing the splits. You know what I mean? Like, how do we do that? And so, how do we support ourselves long term? Um, and I think consistent action over a long period of time gets you a lot further. It's not as sexy, but it gets you further, I think.
I'm right with you on that. And just to add on top of that, something that I find within your journey and definitely in mine as well is you're right. A lot of people look for the short term. They want to get the result in 10 days from now instead of 10 years from now. And I think,
Mhm.
especially with my podcast, I've taken this perspective, and you've probably taken this perspective in a lot of areas of your life of looking at the direction that I want to go in rather than the result that I want to achieve. Like when you were surrounding yourself with people earlier in your journey on the weekends, like you said, like you were busy, you were on that road to going towards where you want to go. And it's a lonely road for sure, but you know that you're in the direction that you'd want to go in. And the people that are partying, doing the stuff that you don't feel in alignment with, are not moving in the direction that you're moving in. So it's probably a good thing that you didn't surround yourself with those kind of people. So I think being more focused on where you want to go, the direction, rather than trying to achieve the result is going to serve you in the long run. And that's when the doing the stuff for free and actually learning the skill sets that are going to provide you with the ability to make money from something and in the long term is just it's a much better perspective to take on life, I believe.
Well, these people were actually really good, smart people, and they were having a lot more fun than me. I
Mm.
just had this sort of like unexplainable focus because I wanted to achieve something so badly and I didn't know anyone. So, yeah, I think, everybody's given sort of a different leg up or skill set or course in life, and you got to work with what you got.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So what are you still trying to prove to yourself?
Hmm. I'm still trying to prove to myself that I can have it all, quote unquote.
Mm.
I know that that's sort of a platitude nowadays.
Yeah.
And Ruth Bader Ginsburg says you can have it all, just not all at the same time, which is probably true. But I have focused so much time on my work. And then the last few years, a lot of my friendships to
Mhm.
really build those up. And I'm hoping that in this next phase of life, I really want kids. And so I'm hoping that in the next 8 years, that I can grow Pretty Smart into the brand that I want it to be and really have an impact on a community of women. And at the same time, have like a really fruitful personal and family life. And I just haven't put a lot of attention there, to be honest.
I know the past few years you've put more intention to it. That's for sure. And
Yeah, a little bit more. But I don't know. I mean, we don't have to get into this here. My dating life's not great.
yeah, yeah, I'm with you there. We can say that.
Yeah. Well, you're 20, so you're good. You have time.
Yeah, yeah,
Now's
yeah.
the time to focus on you.
Yeah, and that's it, right? Like when you're so driven, it's hard to think of anything else other than what you're moving towards. I think that's just and I definitely know you resonate with this. It's why you moved to LA. You felt a calling. It wasn't like you were being pushed towards it. You felt a calling. And when you feel called to do something, you have to go towards that thing. Like I spoke with an entrepreneur that sold his business for over $200 million, and he says that when he feels like a compulsion to go towards something, that's when the
Yeah.
things are that's when it's the best. That's when you don't even feel like it's work most of the time, the 16-hour days, all of that kind of stuff.
You have to listen to that. I feel that with people too, with friendships,
Yes.
I call them curiosity meetings. I still do them. I like have coffees with people from all different professions, professors, therapists, scientists, celebrities, whoever that I'm curious about. And I just get a cup of coffee and get to know them and learn from them. And I think it's because I feel I'm like, there's something I feel called to that person. I need
Yeah.
to know them.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think that's a huge thing. That's a smart person, whoever you interview.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely, it's why I do the podcast. Like I want to ask questions. I'm curious about people's lives, right? Their journey. And I'd love to know,
Yeah.
you obviously created a card deck on questions. What are some of the questions that you've been asking yourself recently?
Whew. The question I'm asking right now is, how do I find time to sleep? I know that's not a good one. You know what? I have to be honest with you, James, because
Please.
you're a really good interviewer and I don't want to lie to you. As a person who asks questions for a living, I am not the best at asking questions to myself.
That's why I asked.
Really?
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm not a big journaler. I like to write. Like my notepad, I think has a lot of gems in it because I'll write how I'm feeling, but I'm not a meticulous person personally. At work I'm meticulous, but I wake up, I don't have like a set morning routine. I'm not great about doing like a gratitude journal every single day.
Mhm.
And that is, I think, why I value therapy so much, because it is a trained person who is asking me questions and I don't have to think about them. Because on a day-to-day basis, I'm not great at it. And that's why like the card game, I think, is really powerful because we don't know the questions to ask all the time or even often. I don't. And so if I write them down and gamify it like the card game, then I just pick, and then I ask myself a question and something is enlightening. But I've also, aside from therapy, have like built a lot of beautiful friendships over the last few years, especially with the podcast. With Pretty Smart, I feel like I've met a lot of women who have become friends who are really ambitious and they ask me really thoughtful questions, and that's added a lot to my life.
Yeah, that's really powerful. Something that I've done, because I'm not much of a journaler either, is I'll record voice
Yeah.
memos because I find it a lot easier to just do stream of consciousness when I'm just speaking into my phone kind of thing. It's like speaking to a therapist
Smart.
without them asking me questions. I'm just letting go of all the things that's in my mind.
And where are the question? Are you like answering a question or just stream of conscious, like what you're feeling in that moment?
Usually it's stream of consciousness. I think I definitely need to get the card deck because I don't have it yet, but I need to get it because
I'll send it to you.
I love very genuine questions. Like I have a document in Notion of just genuine questions that I want to ask, whether it's other people or myself, because I think if we can ask better questions, we're going to get better answers. Like a perspective that I've taken recently is we have to look at our mind like ChatGPT. If we ask different questions, we're going to get different answers. It's like you give yourself a prompt, you get it, you're going to get a different answer. So I think it's really,
Exactly.
really powerful
I
in that
do
regard.
too. Eric Schmidt, who's the CEO of Google, said we are a company founded on questions, not answers. And Apple uses the Socratic method, which is answering a question with a question. I think there's it's not a coincidence that a lot of great American companies are founded on the importance of questions.
Absolutely. And I have a question to you that I hope you haven't heard yet. We obviously we see the grit, we see the resilience, we see all of the effort that you've put into what you've built, right? But what are some of the less obvious reasons that you've been able to find success?
That is a great question. The less obvious. I will say one of them is going out of my way to connect other people has been a huge source of success for me. And it was inadvertent because my mom is a connector. I learned it through her. I saw her do it my whole life. If somebody she met on the street was single, she would go out of her way to try and set them up with somebody she knew. If there was a plumber who was out of work, she would go and call all of her friends and message them and say, hey, this guy needs a job. Does anybody need anything from him? Like, she just spent so much time going out of her way for other people. And so it was very natural for me to do that because that's what I saw. And I think because I have gone out of my way to make other connections, a lot of great things have come back to me inadvertently because of that. And I think I've had like a really beautiful network of friends and working relationships because of it too.
That's a really, really great answer, because I think a lot of us think that like there's like success is scarce, like is a scarce resource, but there's room for everybody, and being able to make connections with people. And I've noticed that with the podcasting space as well. Like I love giving guests that I've had on my podcast to other podcasters. Like there's room for every single one of us, even though it sometimes doesn't feel like it is.
Yeah.
Well,
the average podcast listener listens to 7 podcasts a week. So when you think about that stat, it's a very collaborative space, right? Because no one's going to do the same interview as you. They're not you. No. And it's true. Like when you swap information and it's so much better. But you can't really believe it until you experience it, I think.
So very true. No, so very true. And I always tell people that like are hesitant to build a podcast or build anything. It's like you do a disservice by not bringing your unique gifts into the world, because like you just said, no one can bring what you can bring. And that's such an important perspective to take. I know that for you, there's a quote that I heard in another podcast that part of finding success is just believing that it's possible.
Whew. Yeah.
And
I know
I
that was
love that. Yeah, I absolutely love it. And I think we know we talked about confidence a little bit earlier, but like, have you always had belief within yourself, or when do you feel that actually arrived?
Yes. I had belief, I lost it, and then I got it back. So I had incredible belief in myself as a kid, maybe too much. I ran for student council president and I lost. I always tried out for every play. I just always tried. And
I love that.
Yeah, I
love that.
I don't know why. I think my mom also kind of like was like, she always said to me, like, we would be at a park and she was like, you could be on the bench and watch all these people walk past you living their life, or you could get up and live. And I've always just wanted to be one of the people living. I think trying is winning. And so I had incredible belief. I had belief when I moved to LA that like there was no failure. Like I knew that just doing it was winning. And whatever came from it was just icing on the cake, so to speak. And then I was in a relationship when I was like 25. I was in a relationship with a guy who it started out good, but it ended up being like a really bad, hurtful relationship. And when we broke up, I was so depressed and so not myself, and I didn't trust myself. And it was the first time I ever experienced depression. And I really lost a lot of self-belief. I would second guess myself. I looked at myself differently. I was sort of like self-conscious when I was around people, which I had never been before. I'd never like thought about what I was saying. But this relationship put me in a really bad place. And so it took a bit of time, honestly, more time than I would have liked to get back to myself. But I actually think that once I got back to myself, I felt stronger than ever because I felt like I had the resilience to do that. And like that gave me confidence, if that makes sense. I interviewed a child psychologist, and I'm obsessed with the idea of confidence because I think it's like one of the things that makes a successful child. And I said, how do you raise a successful kid? And she said, well, competence breeds confidence. So just by doing stuff, trying stuff, doing laundry, like those types of things, then you have confidence that you can do something. So I think it's scientifically proven. And it's just like the idea that trying is winning.
It is I'm so blessed that you just said that, because I think so many people are going through life thinking that trying is the worst. Like if I try and I fail, then I'm going to look like such a failure. And we care so much about other people's opinions that it holds us back from taking any action. But I think it's such an important take to realize that. And when I was prepping for this podcast, I thought, you are the definition of preparation or luck is preparation when preparation meets opportunity. I'm like blanking.
Oh,
but like
thank
you are the definition of that, because you always put yourself in a position to create your own luck because you were always going out of your way to do that. And I know that obviously it was for like journalism or whatever that came down to, but how can people go about doing that in their own lives?
I love this question. So a friend of mine, Alex Benayan, wrote a book called The Third Door, and it's
one of my favorites.
Really? Have you interviewed him?
I tried. He's not interviewing anyone or he's not going on podcasts right now, but I love that dude's book. He's one of my favorite.
He's not, because he's working on a secret project, but when he's doing interviews again, I promise I'll send him a message and you'll get him.
I appreciate it.
But of course, he's one of my close friends, and separately, I would love his book even if he wasn't. But in the book, I forgot his name. I think it's Shi Lee. Let me look it up.
That was, and as you're doing that, I'll say that book was such a massive page turner. I did not want to drop that book down. Like he definitely made me think of you after I read that book, for sure.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. So he interviewed Shi Lu. And she grew up in a rural village outside of Shanghai, China, that had no running water or electricity. And like the village was so poor that people there suffered from malnutrition. And there were hundreds of kids and one school teacher. And at 27, she moved. Where did he move? At 27, he moved and he started making $7 a month, which was like the most money he'd ever made. And then fast forward 20 years and he's the president of Microsoft. So he has an incredible story. And he said, luck is like a bus.
Yep.
You have to be at the bus station and to get on the bus, meaning like to get lucky.
Yeah.
And I wholeheartedly believe that. And so I just feel like in whatever you're doing, be the most prepared. I look for people who are proactive always, people who are inserting ideas, going above and beyond, that type of a thing. And then you just eventually get lucky because someone sees it, I do believe that.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. And that's why, like I said, throughout every ounce of your journey, whether it was living in a garage or it was sending cookies, like you've always found a way to put yourself in a position to succeed. And I admire it so much because not many people talk about that, especially throughout their story, even if they did do anything like that. So it's very admirable. There's one last question
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. There's one last question I ask every guest. It encapsulates what I want to do with this podcast. The question is, what belief are you currently unlearning?
Hmm. That's a good question. What am I unlearning? Sorry, I'm trying to figure out what I'm
No, I
unlearning.
love it. There's never been, if it makes you feel better, there's never been one person that can actually answer that just right off rip. So you're good. Take all the time you need.
Thank you. Unlearning. I think that I'm unlearning my own, this is going to sound convoluted, but I'm unlearning my own projection of who I was supposed to be. So I had this idea of what I was going to look like and how much money I was going to be making and where I was going to live and what kind of job I was going to have. And my life feels and looks so different than what I thought it would when I was in college. And I think I'm unlearning that sort of projection or expectation was possible at all. It never turns out. It very rarely turns out the way you think it will.
Yeah.
But oftentimes it turns out better. So there's a lot to look forward to. It's just you have to, for me, I had to unlearn the expectation of it. If that makes sense.
Yeah, yeah, it does. I think we're often projecting the future that we think that we want, and then when we get what we actually were supposed to have all along, we realize that that's everything and more, and like the reality that we thought we wanted wasn't even
Yeah.
close to the reality that we got. So that's a
Completely.
beautiful answer. And Danielle, thank you so much for coming on the show. I appreciate your time and your presence and everything in between. I appreciate you very much. Thank you.
Thank you. You are so present and you ask such beautiful questions. So thank you for this.
Absolutely.